I'm James Turk. I'm a director of the Gold Money Foundation, and I'm here today with Alistair MacLeod, former banker, broker, and brilliant author. You know, Alistair, you've written some wonderful, wonderful pieces for the Gold Money website.
Well, thank you.
We've had thousands of people all over the world clicking into the things that you've been writing. I sincerely appreciate that.
Oh, I'm glad.
What do you have in plan for future articles? Still going to focus on the problems in the banking system?
Well, I mean, my theme always is trying to educate people about what is really happening to their money, and that's really the subject of my speech tomorrow. Sound money, to my mind, is not understood. It really isn't. And it really undermines everything. Government statistics, everything. And I think you spoke about the concept of inflation, pricing things in gold. That's really the only way you can understand what is going on. And it's getting this message out to everybody, how their savings are being destroyed and debased continually. And that debasement, unfortunately, is accelerating now. And that's why the world is in such a mess. Yeah,
it's absolutely, killing the middle class. And the tragedy there is that that's where production and savings, the bulk of it, occurs in a free market society. Yeah. And if the middle class is destroyed because of bad government policies, if the savings of them are destroyed by bad government policies, it's really hurtful for the overall economy.
Yes.
And I guess the flip side of that coin is that a lot of this money that is available goes into bad investments. Homes in Stockton, California that should never have been built. Homes in the south of Spain that should never have been built. Yeah. And all of this capital, which is so hard to accumulate, gets wasted.
Well, it's worse than that in the sense that savings have been so discouraged, particularly in the United States and also in the UK. We used to tax savings. You remember unearned income tax? I mean, the very stigma that you nasty capitalist, actually are earning interest without getting your hands dirty. We've moved away, thank goodness, from that. Mrs. Thatcher saw the end of that. But it typifies government approach to savings. And the Keynesian approach really is that savings are a drag on the economy. The savings paradox, we've all heard this sort of stupid argument. But the fact of the matter is that an economy can only work where you have consumption and you have deferred consumption in the form of savings.
Savings, yes.
And that broadly was how our economy worked until the First World War. I think that we introduced the sovereign in about 1821. There was the Bank Charter Act in 1844, which wasn't ideal because it didn't control bank lending. But the effect of that was we had a solid currency. Sovereigns, I mean, they still bought. A sovereign was a sovereign right up until World War I. And prices declined over that period of time by, well, we don't have statistics, but I think a reasonable guess is about 40% over that whole time. And that decline in prices is a reflection of the improvement in value to consumers in what they bought in their day-to-day items. And it enhanced the value of savings. So when you saved and when you retired, well, most people died before they retired, admittedly, but it did mean that people had savings on which they could retire, and the value of those savings went up as they got older.
Yes.
That has now been replaced by inflation, where you get a wonderful compounding effect from high interest rates. I mean, not now, but certainly if you look over the last 40 years, you get a wonderful compounding effect in in a sheltered investment like a pension fund or something like that. But when you start drawing down on it, the inflation rate kills it considerably more rapidly. So you end up with the absolute reverse of the 19th century situation. You end up with people having maximum savings the moment they retire, and they're in penury if they live too long. And of course, the effect of that is to throw everybody onto the state. And it's the destruction of the savings which has really destroyed, I think, the finances of the state more than anything else. And I don't think people really understand that. And I'm not sure that this has really been factored in. You hear all these estimates as to unfunded pension liabilities and so on. I don't think that has been fully factored in.
Yeah. Let me go back to the point that you're making about the sovereign and the end of the classical gold standard from the late 1800s up until early 1900s, 1914, when governments started going off of the gold standard. During that period of time, there's a lot of misunderstanding because people have been taught to believe that deflation is a bad thing. But basically what you were describing was a deflationary environment. People's incomes were essentially stable because you were priced in terms of how many sovereigns you were earning or how many pounds you were earning, because the pound and the sovereign were essentially two synonymous terms because they were completely interchangeable for one and the other. And then technological improvements over time would lower prices, more efficient farming machinery, so the cost of food would go down. And that lowering of food prices and things of that nature was a mild deflation, which actually appreciate people's savings and their capital accumulation during their working years.
Absolutely. It's a natural result of a free market with sound money. And I mean, a labourer's wages were probably something like 7 and 6 a week for decades. But towards the First World War, 7 and 6 bought a considerably more than 7 and 6 did 40 years earlier. Yeah. So that is the difference. And labour obviously has to move. I mean, you get industries which either get obsolete because they're replaced by something else, or in the natural course of events, companies fail. They fail to respond to the market adequately. And yes, people have to move from one job to another. And that was perfectly natural. And very often when they moved, they might have to accept a slightly lower salary in order to move. But if they made a career of it and so on and so forth, I mean, they had the opportunity. Now they don't have the opportunity because the cost of employing people is forever escalating in paper money terms. And of course, companies' balance sheets are run in paper money terms, and it's actually quite difficult for them to employ people at a time of inflation, and particularly with all the regulation and so on, which is a separate thing, but it's another burden which is put on companies. So we now have an economy which is considerably less responsive because it is controlled and it is run under a regime of government money.